3, 2, 1, take. Damn, Daniel. Guys, I have never used a ring light in any video, so isn't this pretty cool, you guys? I just, thought it would be cool. Throughout these past, I'd honestly say 4 days, I've been doing a lot of research and, kind of looking into things that have happened in the past years leading up to not necessarily leading up to what's happened today, but I feel like has had a very, very impactful push and key factor in the things that is happening right now. The reason why I wanted to make this video is because there's a couple events that I haven't been seeing anybody talk about in the videos that they make regarding government simulations that have been happening. I know a lot of my videos are way out of the box, but this is kind of my first out of the box video, and I want to kind of make it a little bit different and edit it differently, so let me know how it goes and if you enjoyed this. So I have been looking into government simulations. I don't even say it's governmental, just national events, world events, and it's very odd that things that have happened in the past are not being talked about in more depth today. It's like people, we have to rely on YouTube videos, and a lot of the stuff was really interesting. I couldn't find some of the articles on regular Google. I had to go to other search engines to find some of the information that I wanted. So, what am I talking about? What are government simulations, and what are these kind of just, I don't know what to call them, tabletop meetings, table meetups? It's basically where mock simulations are presented to a whole bunch of people. They can be people that are part of world leaders, they can be people that are part of the federal government, people that are part of the World Health Organization, people that are part of trades, or big pharmaceutical companies, just people that actually have a huge role in how this world works. These people come together and discuss events that could possibly happen, or scenarios that may happen, and how we could or they can possibly go about it to help diminish the effects and havoc that certain events can have. I want to try to cover really as quickly as I can 6 simulations that I also want you to actually take the time to look into yourself. What's even more interesting is almost all of these were live recorded and streamed, so all of them are available for you to watch from start to finish. Some of them are days long, some of them are only an hour long, but I really recommend you taking the time to look into these and kind of gather your own thoughts, because this isn't really a video that will have a solid conclusion. It's kind of just going to be one that I want us to have an open-ended discussion about and see what you guys think, and if you guys have any of the weird feelings that I'm feeling. So without further ado,
let's get into these government simulations.
The first simulation that I want to talk about happened at the Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, and it took place on June 22nd and 23rd of 2001, and it was known as Operation Dark Winter. Now, this was a senior level biotech simulation that created a mock version of a widespread smallpox attack on the United States. And the simulation was developed for this smallpox virus to completely go out of control. This virus became something that was absolutely unable to be managed. So as I said, it's a group of people who are invited to this simulation. They have no idea what they are going to be exposed to. They have no idea what videos they're going to be watching, to what circumstances they're going to be involved with. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but I had to do this in class one time. I think I was in my 3rd grade, but you had to get together in a group and you had to build a town. One of the #1 key factors that we came upon was that we didn't put cracks in the sidewalks, and it led to a whole bunch of cracks, people tripping, people falling, and it caused a whole bunch of issues. So that's what these simulations are for. Simulations that present people who have a huge ability to control this place. It presents them with the situation and how they can handle it. That's what happened. These groups of individuals were presented with a smallpox outbreak that took over, originated in Oklahoma City, and they wanted to see, how these people would go about it and the catastrophe that went about it. So they would have, and I'll put little snippets in, but they'll have news clips that are all fake, but they are for this simulation, so people know what the potential of the outbreak could be. So this simulation itself exploited the weakness of the United States healthcare and its inability to handle such of a threat. It proved that there would be widespread panic and that mob violence would arise. It showed difficulties that media would have in providing Americans with the necessary information that they needed. People that were involved with the simulation, they thought it might be necessary to start block off borders or put on travel bans. The key factor that caused them to be so unprepared was their lack of drugs and vaccinations, and decision makers wanted information faster than what was readily available for them. So the information that they gave to the public and the numbers that they gave weren't accurate to what would really be happening in reality. Some people advised placing quarantines around specific affected areas, and others found it that dealing with media would be the major immediate challenge for all levels of the government. And the very first thing noted in one of the first simulations that I'm talking about is lack of resources. So back in 2001, one of the key factors they realized if a pandemic were to happen is lack of resources, lack of control of the media. This simulation ended after 2 days, and this wasn't one that was put on to conclude anything. There was no real explanation to how we're going to do this or what would be the proper steps. They just wanted to show what can happen with the rapid spread of a disease, how quickly it can take over, and how we are not prepared. It wanted to highlight the vulnerabilities that we have, and then how we could further assess how we can fix those in the future. Now moving forward, and this one was interesting because out of all of the simulations that I had been seeing, I had never heard anybody talk about the Atlantic storm simulation that took place in January of 2005. This would test how world leaders would manage the catastrophe of a fast-moving global epidemic of a deadly disease. In this exercise, it mimicked what transatlantic leaders would be forced to do and how they would respond to a bioterrorist attack. And this was played by current and former officials. So again, a huge meeting where people who are actually official or former officials knowing how the federal agencies work and how the systems work. With this simulation, it presented a smallpox outbreak that started in Europe. And the BBC News has an amazing short video on this that I can link, and it's actually, summarizing this whole Atlantic storm situation in a video, which is probably really helpful. I took it to be really helpful. But this simulation was designed to provoke the imagination and to prompt action by seeing its effects more vividly. It illustrated that the heads of states cannot be expected to create a necessary response. Instead, response systems need to be created. Another thing that came about, a key factor that they realized through this simulation, was that there needed to be a stockpile of products that would become scarce. We needed to already stock upon it way before it even happened, and that's not the individuals, it's the governments and the economy itself who are able to provide us with the necessary items we need. So they saw here and how they dealt with it and what the newscasts showed them through the simulation. That was one of the key things that they saw again. Lack of resources, so we need to stock up. Another thing was that they must plan ahead, and no matter how much we plan ahead, if a pandemic were to hit us, it's going to be tough to deal with no matter what. So in 2005, they were brought this information and came upon this conclusion that, hey, it's going to be tough. So let's prepare. Now, the next simulation that I want to talk about is a really interesting one, and I think it's because this one is the one that I feel like plays off the most of what's kind of playing out right now. So this is the GLADEX exercise that took place on May 15th of 2018, and it was hosted by the Johns Hopkins Center of Health and Human Services, and it was a day-long event in Washington, D.C. Now, this was similar to the Dark Winter and Atlantic Storm simulation, in which they wanted to educate senior leaders at higher levels, and they wanted to illustrate the high-level strategic decisions and policies that would be needed to prevent such a severe pandemic from happening, and what we could do to diminish the effects of it if the pandemic were not able to be stopped or repressed. What was really interesting was that this helped policymakers gain more insight of the urgent challenges that they would face in a real-world crisis. They made sure to include members from both the Republican and Democratic parties. This simulation took place mid-term of the primary election season. With this simulation, what they mocked was a mysterious illness that emerged from Germany and Venezuela. It resulted in a bunch of death rises, hospital stays. They decided to name this GLADEX. They named the virus GLADEX, and it was mysterious because it had no known antivirals, there were no vaccines, and they could tell right off the bat that it had a pandemic potential due to the number of patients. The reason why I find it so interesting is because they called this GLADEX, and this is in the simulation. Rewind to February 2018. Outside of the simulation, the World Health Organization adopted a name called Disease X. And the reason that they adopted this name was because they wanted to have basically a little parking spot for a name of a disease that had the potential of being something that was unknown. So this disease X was adopted by the World Health Organization, and then they put on a mock simulation of a mysterious illness that is named GLADEX. So what eventually happened in the simulation was that lab results proved that this was a deliberately engineered virus. It was deliberately engineered. And what were they trying to say this was deliberately engineered, and where? Remember they were saying that they came from a laboratory? What we're dealing with today is just similar to this little mock simulation. Eventually, after a while in the simulation, they found a vaccine, but it took a while and it caused a lot of pain. And one key result was that the people who were involved with this, they talked about the notion that travel bans would not be effective and that they may be a lot more harmful than helpful. They realized that you can't sit around and just wait. So if another location is being smacked with a huge outbreak, you can't just sit and wait and hope that in a couple weeks we can figure out what it's going to do, and it's not going to tiptoe its way to us. So they also realized that if an outbreak happens in one place, you already need to start taking the precautionary steps and measures. Another recommendation that they had from this exercise was that they wanted to be able to make vaccines in a matter of months as opposed to years. So those of you know, it takes years to do vaccines, to do trials, to do all of that. One of the recommendations from this scenario was that maybe we could find doctors who can make vaccines in way less than a year, talking months. Another thing was that the community needs to be very well prepared, something that we've been hearing with every simulation we've talked about. The next thing was that we need to build a strong global health security system. We can't just depend on one state to cover themselves. We need to have an actual organization put into place for when this happens. So we're not just turning to everybody, to police officers, to judges, to who knows, the president, and being like, hey, can you help us, when they're not even educated on what a crisis or a pandemic or what goes about it is. That's why they have these simulations. So there are people out there who are prepared, do know the repercussions, do know the possible scenarios, do know the possible devastations. You know why this is kind of confusing me and why I'm not understanding the present day reality when we have all of these simulations that we've gone through as a world, not just one country or one state. So with that being said, that was what GLADEX was about. You can also live stream this entire simulation on Global Health How. It might be .org something. I'm not sure. If I can remember, I will link it below. But I'm telling you, I really want you guys to go out there and do this research for yourself. So the next simulation that I want to talk about in more in depth, and then the next two I'm just going to cover kind of real quickly, and then kind of share a little bit of my thoughts. This next one was the Crimson Contagion, and this actually took place from a long period of time. It was between January and August of 2019. Some websites said that this was brought on by the Trump administration's Health and Human Services. Others were saying that it was a collaboration from the United States Health and Human Services and FEMA, who collaborated to do this simulation. This exercise tested the nation's ability to respond to an outbreak of an influenza that they named H7N9 that originated from China. The reason why they put on this simulation was more so from a real world and real life reason. It's because they saw the devastating effects that the Ebola virus and the Zika virus had on civilization, and how rough it was for people to handle it, how hard it was to stop the spread of that. So they wanted to put on another simulation, and throughout this long period of time, to figure out how we can better handle something if this happens again. This originates from China in the simulation. It starts appearing in Chicago when tourists start coming home from China, and it just starts going out of hand, because then before it starts being kind of discovered as this virus that it is, people are then traveling from here to here and here and here. So it honestly becomes a widespread pandemic. The key findings for this simulation was that this one was what I found very interesting. Very interesting, and why, if they found these key findings, why they did not put this in place or into consideration while dealing with what we're going through right now. The key finding was that the federal government lacks the funding to even respond to the pandemic in the first place. The participants lacked the clarity the roles of federal government agencies even have, and they lacked the proper knowledge of what information should be released to the public, what proper information should be passed on. They realized that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has issues providing accurate information to hospitals, and honestly, everybody at the meeting kind of came to the agreement that they didn't really know who would come to take charge if this pandemic happened. Who would be the one to step up and say, okay, I got this figured out? They realized that in 2019, even though they've been putting on these mock simulations since 2001, within 20 years of all these high-level articulate individuals who are supposed to know how the heck to run this thing we call an Earth, we still haven't figured out even a morsel of how to go about this. I mean, look at what we're dealing with now. The second wave is literally tiptoeing into our backyards. You know, it's just so interesting. They realize that the U.S. lacks the production to meet the demands of protective equipment, meaning face masks, respirators. They realize that through this mock simulation. So how could you not be better prepared in 20 years? So you would think that somebody would remember what they wrote down in their notes, or they would allow somebody else to the microphone and be like, oh wait, hey, I was at this simulation like 2-3 years ago. Actually, I was in the simulation back in 2001. We talked about how this could happen, and we talked about the precautionary measures that we could put into place. Let's put those into place. Instead, everybody's wandering around with their head up there, you know what? And it's like, who, like they said, in 2019, who's going to take the lead? It's almost 2021, and still nobody really knows what the heck is going on. I am going to place a screenshot of all of these plans that throughout these years have been put into place to help calm a pandemic. So these strategically factored plans were tested in this Crimson Contagion simulation. They wanted to see how these plans that we supposedly have already put into place, how they would work. And then the next one, which is a month later, is Event 201. And Event 201 is probably the biggest wake-up call that there could probably ever be to a society into the how did you make a simulation with a mock that took over the world? And now that's what's literally happening right now. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to go too deeply into Event 201 because that one is so widely and massively talked about. I sat through hours of the footage from Event 201. And it is absolutely eye-opening, it is confusing, and it makes you really wonder, is history repeating itself because we want it to, because there's another ultimative plan? Like, what is going on, and why is this so hard when we have all of these simulations going on? So, outside of the Event 201, outside of the Atlantic Storm, Crimson Contagion, GLADEX exercise, the Operation Dark Winter, outside of all of these professionally ran simulations, there was a project that was launched. This is the Transition Integrity Project. This was a mock simulation that was put on between December 2019 into August of 2020. That's almost a whole year that this Transition Integrity Project took place, but it was a short-term project that identified the potential risks of the president not leaving, of preventing a disrupted presidential election and having a smooth transition. The games that they played in this project are so interesting, are so strange, that it shows you how prepared other people are and how ignorant they let the people stay. Like, it's not necessarily that I'm scared, and I think that's why I wanted to make this video, is because we have nothing to be scared of. We have absolutely nothing to be scared of. They know what is going to happen. And I'm not even like, I told you this is going to be an out-of-the-box video, but this is why I want you to do as much research as you can. And if not, I promise, I'm trying to do the research too, and I'm trying to get better at it because I want to share more information with you that I look into outside of YouTube that I don't necessarily talk about. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't just some weird little thing or, you know, a topic I read about in a book. These are actual world events that happened to prepare us. We've been preparing, understanding, evaluating, analyzing, concluding. Like, what other word do I need to put out there? I don't even have that well of a working brain, and I feel like this puzzle is just completely, it was almost put into place, and then somebody just picked it up and threw it at the wall. And then they just want somebody else, Betty from math class, to walk in and like fix it, and she's like, I don't specialize in puzzles, I just like solving math problems. Like I said, I feel like all of us, like, we're coming to kind of like this realization that all of us are pointing the finger in the wrong direction. Like I said in my last video, nobody knows what the heck is going on. I don't know, you guys, but I don't know why we're not looking at the people who are all a part of these simulations, because they were not just random Joes that were picked up on the side of the street and were like, hey, do you want to come and try out this mock simulation and let's hear your ideas? You guys, I will show pictures. These are actual people. Like actual people whose jobs it is to circum the things that they talked about and the positions that they held and proved themselves to hold in these simulations. It doesn't matter if it was a mock simulation. And I really am sorry if this whole video was kind of confusing. This was the third day I've tried to record this, and each day I'm like, no, I'm going to get better, I'm going to do more research, I'm going to try harder. And so many people are referring to, oh, there's a dark winter coming. Look into the dark winter operation that happened in 2001. I don't know, you guys. I'm very confused at this whole situation. I think that there are no such thing as coincidences. So to see that even just last year before this took off, they had already put on a simulation of a virus taking over, the exact same way it's happening. They talked about shutting down media. They talked about travel bans. They talked about quarantines. They talked about testing. They already talked about it. So the fact that it's such an issue right now, it's almost like y'all should have prepared harder or something. I don't know. And some people might be like, Sarah, it's not that big of a deal. I want you guys to just look into it a little bit because it's so interesting. And I hope at least some of the footage and pictures that I placed on here can help you understand what I mean by how odd this is, and that it's like what you don't read in the terms and conditions. We were invited to those meetings. We had the ability to click on a website link and watch the whole simulation take place from start to finish. Just nobody told us about that. And why? Why wasn't that something major? Everybody wants to act like it's so important to get kids into a high school Zoom call. Why not get the whole world into a Zoom call and understand that we have issues with viruses and pandemics that could happen. So why not all team together so then when a disaster happens, we aren't just fending for ourselves. We already had a plan. We all know that we could put our arms around each other and say, yo, we've got this. If we don't work together, it's probably going to be worse. So I don't know what the heck is going on. I just think it is very odd that there were so many simulations. For the last 20 years, we've been preparing for the reality that's happened. If you guys want me to make individual videos on any of the simulations, if you want me to talk about Event 201 or Transition Integrity Project, yeah, I can definitely talk about that because it's almost like they picked one of the games to go along with. You just gotta look into it to hear me out. You just gotta look into it to hear me out. And then you gotta look into the people who funded that research project for that long. Alright, my friends. I hope the third time was a charm and that you enjoyed this video. It's, you know, my first real informative video. My usual ones are just like about, like I said, little theories I read about in books or ideas and things that come to me when I am reading. Just let me know your thoughts. And let me know if you knew about any of these simulations, if this is your first time hearing about them. I had never heard about the Atlantic storm during my information, so what did you learn today? Huh? Also, fingers crossed it still goes through. Thank you, Franny, for sponsoring this video and allowing me to review this ring light. This isn't the first video I'm going to make with this. I kind of want to see what the big hype of them are about. I don't know if this lighting looks a little bit more interesting, or if you guys enjoy this more than my regular lights that I use sometimes, or the natural light. Just let me know. It's kind of cool that I have different ways to experiment, and maybe I could like do product reviews with this or something. I really hope that you guys are having an okay time. Don't let this stuff stress you out too much. I know that's pretty much impossible. It's impossible, and I don't want to, you know, just act like you have to be positive all the time. That's not what it is. I want you guys to know that it'll be okay, and maybe if you do a little bit more research, you might not be too freaked out. You might just be more confused and like, dang, I knew this was a game. I told you, we just gotta learn how to play the game. Play it harder. But the game's playing us right now. Okay, you guys. I will talk to you later. Hasta mañana.